Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Claudia, and I'm really excited to be your host for today's Awakin Talk together with Deepak. Welcome and thank you for joining us. The purpose of these talks is to share stories to help plant seeds for compassion, while fostering also our inner transformation. We do this by holding collective conversation with guest speakers from all walks of life. And today we have our special guest, Prasad Kaipa. We are very, very happy to have him with us. We also have all our volunteers behind us helping in the call. And today, in the first part of the call, we will have Deepak engaging with me and Prasad in a moderate question and answer. And then we will have Prasad sharing a bit on his own. But if at any moment you have any questions, please feel free to just share it with us in the chat. And this will be passed to us and we will ask the questions to Prasad. So thank you for joining us. And we would like to invite you now for a minute of silence to just anchor ourselves in this present moment. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thank you, Claudia, and thank you all once again for joining us today. We are in conversation with Prasad on the theme of death, Vedanta, dying, business. And I have known Prasad for more than a decade. He has been a personal mentor. But I thought it will be really good to know about his formal bio as well. And, to set some context of this conversation. So Prasad holds a PhD in physics from IIT Madras, and he taught at the University of Utah, where he helped build an international research laboratory. And later at Apple, he served as a technology advisor, and then he was a research fellow at Apple University. And then he changed tracks and he became a thought leader in innovation, leadership, and change management. He advised and coached 130 plus C-level executives at Fortune 500 companies like Apple, Adobe, Boeing, Disney, Microsoft, Nokia, Oracle, like the list just goes on. And then he also used the Bhagavad Gita framework and several interviews with CEOs to co-author a bestseller book by the name From Smart to Wise. He also founded the Center of Leadership, Innovation and Change at the Indian School of Business and the Thai Silicon Valley's Entrepreneur Institute. He retired in 2019, which we will talk about. And since his retirement, he's working with several nonprofits and enjoying reflecting on his learnings from Indian spiritual wisdom and focusing on his own inner transformation. Thank you, Prasad, for accepting our invitation to join us today. And we look forward to hearing more about your views on death and dying. And it's a pleasure to host you for this Awaken Talk.
Thank you, Deepak. It's a pleasure to be with you and Claudia and Rohit and all our wonderful people. I'm looking forward to spending time with you.
So one thing that I deeply appreciate about Prasad is his ability to look at the deeper questions of life and to examine them. And every conversation with him feels so meaningful. So we would like to share a small clip as a window into his being. And maybe Nipun, if you could just play that clip.
I applied to 172 jobs and didn't get one of them. It was a recession period, 1981, 82. When I was doing shopping to go back to India, I met an Indian gentleman in a shopping mall. He invited me to dinner to his house, and then later he said, "Oh, you are a physicist. There is somebody in medical school who is looking for a physics postdoc. Would you be interested? And so I ended up with that interview. And then I found the physics PhD I have was not connected with his. So that was almost, that opportunity died. But he was showing me the lab anyway. And then I was asking questions about how is he doing this, how is he doing this, how is he doing that. Then he said, wait a minute, you said your field was optical information storage. How do you know about radiation a lot? I said, there was an accident in my lab and I was helping somebody else to do the radiation work. So I have a couple of papers in radiation, even though it is not connected with my PhD dissertation. He said, it doesn't matter whether it's connected with your PhD dissertation, and he gave me a job. So I ended up, it was really an accident, and a second level accident that got me. So that moment, I became friends with a gentleman called Ed Haskell, really close friends even after 40 years. It was a leadership development program, and the gentleman happened to be an American, and he was talking about certain perspectives. And he kept saying, drop that. What you heard from others, you drop it. You need to look at what is going on within you. When did you really love somebody? So then I realized I didn't know whether I know what love is. And I was completely baffled. So I just stood up and said, I have all these wonderful loving moments, but I don't think I know what love is. And I started crying. He just looked at me very, very kindly. And then he said, this moment of you saying, I don't know what love is something that is extremely important and profound. We never get to it. We have all images of love, but are we present to love? And he gave me a hug. And at that time, I knew I'm transformed. I learned that I need to strip. I need to die to the moment, and I need to be present to my ability to inquire into myself. So that I feel is the kindest and the greatest gift a person could have given to me. When I retired 3 years ago and I looked at it, I said, I could have stopped. I didn't need to really think about all this. So I felt, because of my fear, I focused on bringing security, but ignored my children's time of growing up. So stay, even if you are a little poor, stay, even if you are not able to provide security, stay with family, spend time with family, and create moments of love and enjoyment. And nothing else is more valuable than that. I will spend a little bit of time meditating and letting go, first of all. Because before I speak with my wife and children or grandkid, before I tell them, I will actually write down some of the things which are important to me, what they brought to my life, and what are some things which I want to share with them, and be with them. Be with them in the way in which they want to be. It is about creating moments of joy. I think that's what I will focus on. Purnamadam Purnamidaha Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. I think
Thank you so
ego
much.
has taken over for me. I'm feeling so much of so big and so this one. So now we need to get back to real self rather than all that wonderful thing.
So that was a brief glimpse into Prasad's thought process and Prasad's answers to some of the questions that we asked him. That last verse, that last shloka, Prasad, was beautiful. I was wondering if you could spend a couple of minutes talking more about what that means to you.
Thank you, Deepak. Yeah, Purna Madam Purna Midaha is like the essence of Hinduism at some level. While we talk about sunyam, we talk about emptiness in Buddhism, that is not empty like empty. In some respects, if you turn it around, essentially Purnam, if you are not experiencing it, it feels like emptiness. In this particular context, because in Hindu context, it's all about the mind and the intellect, buddhi, and being able to conceptualize and being able to meditate and focus on this wholeness. That's what it is all about. So, in Hinduism, even if it is not something that is immediately touchable and feelable to your body and your senses, the whole context, the system's context, is something that you need to pay attention to. So this wholeness that we experience as my reality, it is complete. Like you can very clearly see that when you look at people who want to have a COVID vaccine, people who don't want to have a COVID vaccine, whether you talk about right side of the political spectrum or left side of the political spectrum, each of them have got their own reality. In their reality, it is complete and it is whole. But when we come together, like just yesterday or today, I heard that on the space station, the Russian and American cosmonauts actually came together and they talked about, even though their countries, Russia and America, are fighting on the ground, on the terrestrial plane, they said in the space, we are friends. And they appreciated how each of them actually supported each other. So for me, that is complete. So that means there is conflict that is going on, but at a deeper level, there is kindness, there is generosity, there is love, and that makes the whole picture complete. So Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate, just like a pregnant mother gives birth to a baby, the baby is complete, baby is whole, an individual by herself or himself, and the mother is complete. So when the baby, who is a whole person, comes out of the mother, mother does not have to sacrifice herself to give birth to the another. So that means from the completeness emerges. So the system and the wholeness is like infinity. So if you take large amount of stuff out of infinity, it still remains as infinity, because that is definition of infinity. Like that, the consciousness which we are dealing with, the compassion, the friendship, love, some of these wonderful values that we respect and care for and we offer as a service to other people, is this wholeness. It's like a bank that has infinity in it. However much we draw kindness, however much we share love and compassion, we have infinite supply of it. So for me, that is something that is extremely important, and especially in the context of death and dying, it is important to remember that higher purpose. So that's what this sloka means to me. It's called a Shanti mantra, by the way, and that's what I operate with majority of the time.
Thank you so much.
So Prasad, one question. You told us the other day that since you were a child, of course, you were learning Sanskrit and the scriptures, but when did it really hit you how valuable this wisdom was in your life? I mean, like, because then you went on to study physics and you carry on and went on the world, right? Like took over the world. But when did you realize, oh my God, this is so valuable what I have here, and maybe I'm not valuing it so much actually?
I have to tell a small story for that. In my teenage, it doesn't matter that I learned Sanskrit. My parents insisted that I should go to a Sanskrit teacher, one Meda Subramanya Shastri. I was going every day till I finished my master's around 20. I went to his house every day on weekdays and learned Sanskrit. But being a teenager in 1970s, I didn't want to believe in God. I didn't want to believe in religion. I didn't want to believe in spirituality. At some level, I became an atheist and I wanted to learn about the external world. And that's what led me to take physics. And after PhD, I came to United States. And even when some of the people asked me, how about religion? How about you being a Hindu? Like there was a subscription. Somebody asked me, can you subscribe to Hinduism today? I said, I don't believe in any isms. I like to be a global citizen. I like to think of myself as, everything together. I don't want to be in that. But when I was a fellow at Apple, looking at how people learn and how people think, I was really proud of what I learned, going into the operating theaters, interviewing multiple Nobel laureates, and researching with a large number of extraordinarily quiet and remarkable people. My head has swollen so much. And I was really, really, really arrogant. And I had gone in 1989 to a conference called Business of Business is Learning, where I met some of the friends who still, even after 30, 40 years, they are still good friends to me. They literally nicely trimmed my ego. They started asking me some important and significant questions about yoga or about pineal gland and pituitary gland and something about what's happening in the brain. I was just saying, I just came back from looking at operating theaters of the brain surgeons, of the brain operations, and I spent time with the brain surgeons. But then I found out brain is an organ that doesn't actually have even feeling of pain. Sometimes, even if you scoop off a little bit more brain in the time of surgery, while taking off the tumor, you won't know it. Only when you come back, you recognize some parts of your capability are lost. So, as I was recognizing the mind is different from the brain, and what we learn, how we think is very different. There is something about our self which is much larger than our brain. My uncle, he gave me a book called Autobiography of a Yogi. And I was reading that and I came back. I remember it was a Thanksgiving time in 1989. And I was reading the book on the plane and then I came back. It just put me into a different state. I went off into Yosemite because my wife was in India. I spent like 3 weeks in the snow and I came back. And I resigned from Apple because I just realized what I know is infinitesimally small when compared to what is there to know. And I was so arrogant. Apple itself is a company where we pride ourselves for our arrogance. And on the top of it, I'm a knowledgeable Indian. I'm a Brahmin. I have learned Sanskrit. I was just unbelievably ignorant. But when I read the book and when I started meditating and spending some time, it was like a rebirth for me. I realized everything what I know actually amounts to insignificant and I need to re-examine. And for me to re-examine and relearn, I need to come from a place of question, inquiry, not from a place of answer. And that is what kept me a little bit humble and reconnected me with recognizing I have a lot to learn, and spirituality and the Hindu philosophy for past 30 years has been really a guiding path for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Prasad, it's very interesting that you spoke about this life-changing incident for you. I want to talk about another incident that you you talked about in one of the conversations that we had before the call. And to give everyone a context, I want to talk about the incident that happened almost 3 years back when you were at ISB and you were teaching a leadership course to some of the biggest corporate leaders of India. And you were actually introducing them to Dr. V, who was the founder of Arvind Eye Hospitals, which we all know is like the largest eye care facility in the world. And they're known for serving majority of the patients free of cost. And the underpinnings of this mammoth social initiative that Dr. V created was, of course, spiritual. And he used to say that his purpose was not to solve an external social problem, but to cultivate himself to be an instrument of divine.
Yeah.
And while you were introducing Dr. V to the class, you had a thought within yourself that I'm sharing knowledge about transformation with the world. And when was the last time I was deeply invested in my own transformation?
Yeah.
And then you decided to drop a very big paycheck and retired without any prior planning. So that story gave me goosebumps, and I found it very inspiring and profound. If you could speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah. When I quit Apple and I started looking at how people learn, how people think, how people innovate, and how people lead. So for past 30 years, I have done close to 2,000, 2,500 workshops. A large number of people, large number of workshops on personal transformation, change of mindsets. It used to be called paradigm shifts at one time in 1990s. Then it became mental model innovation, various names, various things. I was doing this transformational leadership. We started it in 1990s with Anil Sachdev and Deepak Chandra, a couple of friends of mine in India, where we used to invite large number of people in India, and then it became global. In ISB, we were doing 3 times a year program, but somewhere along that, as I was introducing Dr. V, and then we had people from Arvind Eye Hospital. I think Tulsi was also there, what you call Tulsi Raj, the head of LICO, and then there was one doctor, I think Devdas, I think he was a dentist, but he was also in charge of HR. They were there, and then I saw a video, a 2-minute video where Dr. V looks at an old woman who is almost blind, and he says, can I do this? And she says, of course, whatever you suggest, whatever you tell me, I will do it. And then Dr. V thinks about and looks at it and says, you know what? This woman, she is putting her life and her livelihood and her eyes in my hand, whom she doesn't even know. How can I actually transform her eyes and her visible vision? And when he talked about it, I don't even remember any of this. I started asking, I'm transforming at least certain perspectives I'm presenting that allows for these people to transform. I have had, tens of thousands of people in my programs, but when did I last transform? Am I repeating? Am I on autopilot? Am I on, literally vomiting what I already know? Am I actually experiencing transformation myself? Or am I just telling like an autopilot, like something like a radio or a TV that keeps on? Have I become one of those who speaks without any authenticity in myself? And how much of what I am telling other people am I practicing in my own life? I was really shaken to the core when I thought about in that 15 minutes, 20 minutes when they were talking about Arvind Eye case. I reflected and it was very clear to me, I don't have the eligibility. We call it arhata in Sanskrit. That means for anything you need to do, you need to have a certain position to speak from. I did not feel I have that position anymore. So the easiest and important thing is I cannot coach anybody. I cannot teach transformation till I experience it myself all over as if it is fresh. I can see it, I can feel it, rather than I have a thought and I have a felt about transformation. That's like a processed food, no longer interesting. So that's when I resigned. And after I resigned, I think it was February 19th, 2019. And that was moment I never went back to earning money or doing any programs for anybody else.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being brutally honest and sharing your wisdom and your thought process. It cannot be more authentic than than the way you described it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I believe you have a quick presentation that you have prepared for our viewers. So yeah. I think we can now go into that section.
Sure. I thought instead of just introducing the death and dying from the Hindu perspective, especially in this technological, sophisticated 21st century world that we live in, I thought it would be very meaningful if I can actually give a few key messages from there. This is an extremely important part. I didn't want to, just flub it and behave as if I can talk from somewhere else. So I put some of them into on a paper. So the key about death in Hinduism is recognizing that our body is not ourselves. Even though we identify ourselves with our body, there is a part of us, our thought processes, our perceptions, our interpretation that we do, our direction, and what we, sometimes we call it as certain vasanas and samskaras. Those are all what we carry, the belief system, the values, whatever we do, and that connected with our body and what we call Atman. There isn't actually an English word that is equivalent to it. Soul is probably closest we can cognate with it. So these are different. So there is a part of us, the body, when we say dies, the body dies. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, they talk about, just like when the clothes that we are wearing are worn or torn, just like we leave those jirnavastras and then put on a new set of clothes, our soul lets go of the body and then essentially takes on a new body. So that is a transformation. So in that perspective, we have a soul that never dies, that is eternal. And there is a body that dies. Who are we? Do we identify ourselves with the body, or do we identify with the eternal self? So sometimes it is called like in Kathopanishad, sometimes it says Amrutasya Putraha, a Sanskrit word. What it means is we are children of immortality. Of course, then you can talk about what is life and what is death. Opposite of life is not death, or opposite of death is not life. Opposite of death is actually birth. But we somehow look at life and death to be like two opposites. So in some respects, several people, we are so afraid, especially for past 2 years with the COVID, and now with the war, and with all the changes and economy and all the other things that are happening, we don't live Actually, that was one of the biggest thoughts I had that led me to retire also. I was really living to create a security because I was doing private consulting and teaching part-time. I was trying to create security for my family, but in that process, I was not really alive to their growth. So I may be living, but am I alive? So similar to that, many people are dead, but even though they are pretending to be alive, instead of that, isn't death actually a beautiful way in which we can get out of it? If we can get, because otherwise it gets tiring. There are so many people, like I remember, like a month ago, my father-in-law passed away. He was like 94, 95. And he was saying, I don't know how long I need to be here. So at some level, you recognize that people come to a place where they feel their job is complete. They are actually, if their body is sometimes not cooperating with them, they would love to go. So for them, death is not a punishment. Death is not a sad thing. Death is freedom. And that's the concept that actually the Hindu perspectives bring in. Die to the ego, divorce from identity. Then, even while you are alive, you become Jivan Mukta. And this is the message that has been talked about in Bhagavad Gita. Actually, most of the chapters, even from the chapter 1, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, because the Arjuna, the righteous king who has been really fighting his cousins, along with his brothers for dharma, for the concept of dharma, when it comes to war, he just doesn't want to fight because he was afraid and he did not want to kill his relatives and his cousins and his teachers and grandparents. So he stops. The entire conversation of Bhagavad Gita is at some level helping him to clarify what dies, what remains. And the Krishna says, whether it is in second chapter, he says something like, he introduces a concept called Sita Pragna. Sita Pragna means a person who is equanimous with attachments. Like when you go to Vipassana meditation, as I know many of you have done, you talk about anicca. Anitya is the Sanskrit word, anicca is the Pali word. What is impermanent? And we talk about the desires are impermanent, aversions are impermanent. As we do the meditation, sometimes we can experience it in our body and in our breath, what is impermanent. So that using some of those, recognizing the prana, exact word is not there again in English, we can call it closest is like a vital breath. So when you try to invert that prana and focus on the dead things, like money, or we have hatred towards some of the people, all that hatred or all that greed, all that negativity that we develop with other people, that constructs the ego. Actually, that creates the illness according to yoga. And if you can live and if you can be alive to moment, like as my friend Yogacharya Raghu says, when you become alive, smaram, which is very different from smarat, like remembering, smriti is remembering. Smaram is actually being present to something. There is a Hindu god, Nataraja, who dances on a demon called Apasmara. So to a certain extent, it is about killing that and being mindful, being present. And when we are present to a higher purpose, when we are living every moment, then that is the secret of yoga. And that's exactly being present. We can slow down our breath and we can live for a long time. So I can talk about some of this and I can just say, I was looking at how many people are alive right now. We talk about 7.8 billion. But if you look at the total number of people who have been alive from the time eternal, it is like 117 billion people that are there. So in some respects, there is a large percentage of people, and there were lots of people who were there. And if you look at the COVID, just COVID has killed over 6 million people around the world. And as of now, there are like so many people who have gone through vaccines. And there are so many people, like 500 million people who have confirmed cases. So my request is for us to develop this thought saying, ask a question, who am I? Not my ego, not my identity. And for me, I looked at it and said, when did I last die? And then the question it comes down to, and the last 2 slides I'll just say is, you need to recognize that in death has got an important part in Hindu context. One is Yama. Yamaraj is considered to be Yama Dharmaraj is his full name, because the death is a god, and that god of death is actually in charge of dharma. So that means whatever we are talking about preserving dharma, preserving values, is a responsibility of the god in charge of death. And by the way, he is a personal death god. There is another god called Shiva, who is part of the Holy Trinity of Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. Shiva's role is to destroy the world. He talks about Srishti, Sthiti, and Laya. Srishti is the creation, Brahma is in charge. Sthiti is Vishnu is in charge. Laya, dissolving the universe into itself. That is the role of Shiva. And he lives in burial grounds. And he is a person saying, die to the body and die to all of this, because death is not linear. We don't need to look at, we are born and we are dead. If we can think about life as cyclical, we are born, whatever is born will die, whatever is dead, depending on 2 conditions. It will be either reborn, if we have done karmas, if we have done actions that hurt other people, that have created negativity, that have become focused on attachment and aversions, then we get reborn. But there is another part, when we are actually operating in some other state, then it is in Kathopanishad, they talk about Shreyas and Preyas. Shreyas is for the larger good of the world. Preyas is about what is good for me in some respects. When I focus on the larger good, when I focus on kindness, compassion, service, commitment to the larger good of the world, when we do that dharma in that respect, sometimes, and develop the sthita prajna capability, then you recognize you are part of that divine consciousness, which is called Paramatma, the one consciousness, one Atman that pervades all of it. And when we become part of it, we leave our samskaras, we leave our vasanas, and then we become part of moksham. Moksham is the liberation. This is what in Buddhism we talk about as nirvana, but in this particular context, we talk about it. So I will not go into all of them. I'll just mention 2 quick things which is important to mention, saying, I had a lot of conversations with, one particular Swamiji, one Swami Chidananda. And Swami Chidananda did a lot of work with Swami Chinmayananda tradition, but also he spent time with Ramana Maharshi, he spent time with Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti teachings, and he is a person whom I respect a lot. And when we were having conversations on death and dying, I just didn't want to miss from my scholarly perspective whether there are spiritual and religious perspectives that he had as a monk. I didn't want to miss out. So in my conversations, when I talked about, he brought 4 important things. One is, everybody dies at a body level, but nobody dies at a spiritual level. Where are you putting your focus? If you put focus on one, you will have nothing but grief. whether about people who died, who are near and dear to you, or people, about yourself if you get ill. So you need to recognize, if you focus on the larger part of it, the Hindu, the Antyesti, all the death ceremonies and all of them are created in such a way you can reduce your grief, you can let go of attachment, let go of the guilt, and feel good about it. Second one he says is, the highest spiritual goal of a Hindu is to realize the pure self. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. These are called Purusharthas. That means Dharma. Anything you do, you have to start and, it begins and ends with Dharma. That's why the god of death is connected with Dharma. Second is Artha. Artha means prosperity. And also Artha means meaning. What meaning are you creating to your life with all the prosperity that you are developing? Third is Kama. Kama means desires. What desires are you leaving your body with? At the dying time, if you still have desires, those desires will push you back for rebirth. That's why in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, you are part of my Ansha. That means you are part of me. A small part of me is reborn into you. So if you want to actually not have the rebirth, at the time of dying, you think of me. How do you think of God at the time of dying if you have not thought about God all through your life? By the way, God here doesn't necessarily mean in a particular name or a particular one. It is like the Brahman, if you want to call, or you can call Shakti, you can call your favorite divine. It doesn't matter. By the way, these can also be taken outside the Hindu context to whatever spiritual consciousness that you believe in. That's what you want to focus on. And finally comes moksha. Moksha, you have to go all by yourself. First three you can do with partners, but for the salvation, you have to go by your own. So the last part of it is, Swami Chidananda is very nice in coming up with wonderful aphorisms, and small stuff. He says, instead of rip, rest in peace, because in the Christian and some other Judeo-Christian context, we talk about soul rests. But in Hindu context, we say the soul travels. We do accept rip, rest in peace, but as Swami Chidananda says, we like to expand it to rise in peace, roam in peace. So with that, let me stop, and we can go back to the conversation, which is more interesting than making a presentation on Hindu perspectives on death and dying. By the way, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I just wanted to give some basic tenets about death and dying in a small presentation.
Thank you so much, Prasad. That was very profound and very deep. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm now going to change tracks a little bit, and I'm going to, talk about or ask you about death and dying when it comes to the corporate context. And, at a personal level, we know that, okay, death is an inevitable truth, and we find it very hard to look at it or reflect on it or accept it. But if we go at the corporate level, it is very similar, wherein, like, suppose we are working on an idea, suppose we are working on a company, and it is not going on the right track, it is failing, and we just don't want to accept it, and we don't want to acknowledge that this thing will not grow on forever, because that is the corporate goal for almost everything, that this thing has to go on forever. And I know that in our previous conversations, you believe that Apple has done a good job killing and, like, forcefully letting go of certain products. So I would like you to speak a little bit about, when somebody is a business leader, how can they learn from death and dying in the context of personal lives, and how can they use the same knowledge in the corporate lives? Like, okay, this is what I learned in the personal lives. How can I actually uh, apply the same thing when it comes to business or corporates?
Deepak, I think we have difficulty in both personal life and corporate life to accept death. For example, whether it is in India or whether it is in Hindu tradition or whether it is in global, any Judeo-Christian, Buddhism, China, anywhere else, nobody wants to talk about death because it is uncomfortable. As a matter of fact, I have seen in many situations when a person, when their father or mother is in the ICU, they don't know whether the person should be put on a ventilator or whether they should do certain kinds of procedures, whether they should actually decrease the quality of life but increase the lifespan by allowing them to go through whatever they go through. And same thing happened when my near and dear went through cancer. We had to make those decisions many times, looking at, is it okay to let them go? But you know what? We never give a chance for a person to say what they want in these kinds of situations, whether they should be resuscitated, whether they should be allowed to go, what it is. So this is called a morbid conversation sometimes for people. So I wish we actually have a conversation about it meaningfully. That's on a personal side. When it comes to corporate, obviously, when we talk about an organization which is a for-profit organization, why is it existing? It is for profit. But we mistake the metric called profit, which is actually something is a result, but it is not a purpose. If we try to make an organization, corporation only to be driven by increasing profit, like somebody said to me, I don't remember who said, he said it is like driving the car, looking at the rear view mirror instead of driving it with a steering wheel. Why? Steering wheel is like the purpose. Like if the corporation is not growing, there are multiple reasons, right? That is something that we can adjust going forward so that the corporation can pick up the growth and reconnect with the customers and sell more. That's possible. But if we only look at what happens at the end of the quarter, like a profit, that means it's like looking back and going forward. So this happens because we look at time as linear, not as cyclical. We don't think about like seasons. Look at it, like spring is here, spring is here, equinox, or for some of the people in India, they talk about Gudi Padwa, Navratri or Ugadi. There are various festivals in India they do. This is called the onset of spring, right? So when there is a spring, suddenly you have flowers, you have leaves, you have greenery, you have wonderful stuff that is happening. And then, of course, in the fall, before winter, all of them will go away. Same way, if we can think about, just like a person is born, they grow up and they die, and then they may be reborn or they may be liberated. If a corporation can think about having courage to say, you know what, these are the products that we have created, but you know what, right at this time, customers are not interested in these products. Instead of trying to do more marketing, more digital marketing or more social marketing and trying to spend all our money to promote a product which is not connecting with people and allowing the competitors to kill our products and along with that kill our company, if we have the courage to say, you know what, this is not working, this is what actually is working, let us find a way in which we will focus on these products and let us get some of the other people to think with, let us examine what would work. For example, because you talked about Apple, like Steve Jobs, there is a very, what you call a correct but incomplete notion of saying Steve Jobs did not believe in somebody else knowing. What do the customers know? Customers don't know anything. I don't do the focus groups. But that is incomplete interpretation. Why? Because he was developing products and he wanted Apple to develop products that he can be a customer. He wanted products that he loves, and he wanted products that are perfect for him. He wanted products that are the best, and he wanted to pay the highest. When they kept that in mind, that means a developer becomes a customer. A developer becomes a designer, and you are designing it for the people who are developing the products, who are the, what you might call suppliers. They are all excited about buying it. Then you don't need to look at what is that customer wants. So that means we need to die to the concept of there is a separate consumer and a separate producer. We need to make it one. We need to make it as one system. That's why instead of looking at just the profit-centric business to be developed, we need to look at not just a stockholder focus, we need to look at the stakeholder focus. When we look at the stakeholders, then the suppliers, employees, customers, and even the environment and the community in which we live, they all grow. And as the system grows, the organization also grows. So if you want your company to succeed, think about the ecosystem and the supplier system and the employee system you are part of. If you can help what works for everybody, the world that works for everyone, if you can create it, chances are, that like the proverb, rising tide lifts all boats, your boat will also raise. If you want your company to grow, but your employees are unhappy, your suppliers are actually dying because you are squeezing their profits because you want to do the best thing, it doesn't work. So corporations have to begin to think about dying and living in a very different way. So when I start something, if there are new customers, what am I starting? Innovating. So for me, creativity and innovation is one way to say, bring life into the organization. Then what should I maintain in my company as products and services, but what modifications I need to make so that they become relevant to the new customers, relevant to the global customers, relevant to people whom I did not create the product in the first place, but suddenly this has got a secondary need. Just like we are finding the vaccines that we developed, suddenly now they are finding the same RMNA kind of approach can be used for even AIDS, even for something else. So there is a possibility for us to rethink and resurface, reformulate some of what we have. That is like keep the soul, drop the body. So keep the soul and then create new medicines, new products, and new things that would resuscitate not only your company, it will give life to your customers, and also it will allow your entire ecosystem to thrive. That is one way we can think about cyclical time. We can think about allowing things to die consciously with awareness, kill the products ourselves instead of customer killing it or instead of competitors killing it. Those are some suggestions I would have.
Thank you, Prasad. I want to go back to the concept of Sthita Prajna. So in the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna is asking Krishna, so Sthita Prajnasya Kavacha Samaritasya Kechava, and then he carries on and asks, so how this person walks and talks and sits and stuff. So one could ask also how this Sthita Prajnasya dies, no? But in this case, I want to ask you, how do you prepare to die?
Yeah.
What is your way of preparing to die?
Okay. So the best way I can say is recognizing money will not come, my family will not come with me when I die. As a matter of fact, none of the papers I wrote or none of the work I did, none of the things which I can see, touch, feel are actually carry forward with me. It is more about what other people think, what other people say they got from me. It is not what I wanted to give. Like, I used to ask a very interesting question when I coach executives. I used to ask them, when people come into your room, do they have more energy? When they leave your room, do they have more energy? They said, what kind of a question is that? I say, do you give life to people or do you suck life from them people? Why is that? Because if they are going away with more energy than they came into your cabin, that means you are a life-giving kind of a person. But if they came with a lot of enthusiasm and they go away like, oh my, if they go that way, then you are a demon incarnate. People didn't like that at all. But essentially, it is the energy that remains invariant. That means, are you able to bring more energy? How does the energy happen in my system? It happens by conversations. It happens by the kindness and compassion that I show. It happens by how much I validate you when you come to me. I can be factual. I can correct. Like I know a person who always corrects anything that comes in. And by the way, that person is called me. My wife used to call me a correction master. She says, I don't listen to what she is saying, but first I come with a red pencil. So, I'm still working on it, by the way. I have made almost 5% progress. I have only 95% left. As my wife and my daughter probably can say, I'm still work in progress. What I realized is, you know what? Yeah, that's true. It is wrong. That is true. It can be improved. But most important part, what they are asking is probably not even said in words. It might have, taken a lot of courage for your subordinate or your family member to bring up a topic which is about you or what you need to improve upon or what you need to change. So if I jump on them on the way in which they communicated, I'm snuffing their life. So I realized with my tone of voice, because I am a professor, right? I have only an outside voice. I have difficulty developing an inside voice. That means I need to be gentle. I need to be soft. I need to be, what you call just not use my voice. I need to use my hands. So I realized I learned how to be a professor and a coach. I haven't learned how to be a husband and a father and a brother or a son still. It's a work in progress because I've ignored it. I focused on outside. I didn't focus on inside. So what I'm preparing is, how can I learn like from the beginning, from my daughter, from my son, from my granddaughter or my wife or other people, how can I actually recognize that I am actually the student? All this time I was thinking that I am the teacher. I was upset that they didn't used to listen to me. But I'm realizing they have a lot to teach. Only thing is I need to keep my mouth 5 minutes at a time, shut up and listen to them. So I'm making some progress in that. And I'm glad that that is what has been on the top of my priority list. Before I die, I don't care if I don't open my mouth and say one single thing, but I would like to listen to what the dreams and the visions and the, what you call excitement, what is happening in their life, what doesn't work. I would like them to be able to share with me. And like when we are developing yoga, we talk about 3 things. And then there is a 4th one. I'll mention that. Fourth one, which everybody does, is karta. That is what develops our karmas. All our karmic thing is done by our actions, karta. But actually, the three most important part is Sakhi Bhavana. Am I being a friend who can accept and appreciate your warts and all? Can I just listen? Even if I know you have a lot of faults, you can still come and put your head on my shoulders and cry, and I'm available and I'm there for you. That is called Sakhi. Second is Sakshi. Swayam vibhati ata anyena sadhanam vina sakshi. That means Swayam vibhati. I can actually see and I'm shining. I am actually being able to see it all. Without any kind of external device, I can do it. But at the same time, I'm not being a neutral observer, but I'm being a compassionate witness. So that means I'm willing to be a judge, but I'm not going to be a harsh judge. I'm going to be a kind, compassionate, appreciative judge. I think that is something that I'm still learning, how to be a sakshi, not just an observer. Third one is Matrutva Bhavam. I'm very good as a father in certain aspects. There is a lot I need to learn. But as a mata, in this body, it is not possible for me to know what my wife went through to give birth to two babies. I'll never know that. And I don't have that creative capability. I may think I may do a lot of wonderful things, but creating new life, what she went through to create new life, how much kindness and compassion she has. I remember when she was preparing for her medical boards, 1 year I took time off and I was actually trying to be what you call taking them to school and taking them to games and all that. You know what happened at the end of that 1 year? Both of my children lost weight. Why? Because I used to cook and say, hey, I cooked this. It's up to you. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. If you eat, you eat. If you don't, you don't. On the other hand, my wife used to cook 4 different kinds of things for 4 of us. And she used to walk with them, sit with them, feed them, take care of them, work with them. In such a way, it was there. And I realized that compassion, that we talk about Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha as Brahma Viharas. It is there in Yoga Sutras as well as it is in Buddhism and all of them. I think Maitri, Karuna, Mudita are very difficult to have. I'm very good with Upeksha, but that doesn't make me a mother. So these are the 3 things. Kartrutva Bhavam is good. We need to do it. But developing Sakhi Bhavana, Sakshi Bhavana, and Matrutva Bhavana, it takes a lifetime of practice. I'm just beginning in that. And I think that is a part of coaching. That's a part of teaching. That's a part of, developing that yogic presence if I want to do. That's what it is about. Tattvamasi, that's what that's about. I think if I can do that, then I have a feeling I can put in an application for my moksha. But I don't know how many lifetimes it will take for me to learn that.
Prasad, I think you were reading my mind, because when you started with Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha, I was exactly thinking about that. And recently I read something that they said that when you have practiced enough, actually the right quality will come at the right moment. So it will be like an emergence. You don't need to decide, oh, do I need to use compassion or this or that? It will just emerge. And so, but I ask you if you have a practice. So I want to insist on that point. Do you meditate? Do you have like an asana practice or a pranayama practice, or how is it? We would really like to, be curious about how do you really prepare, your practice?
Yeah, I want to add to that question. So I think what we are looking for is there a daily practice or a weekly practice or a yearly practice that you do, which, could inspire many of our viewers on how to prepare for death?
One of the things which I'm learning, I'm beginning to practice a lot more these days, is every night to recognize that what if this is the last night? Can I can I sleep with a sense of gratitude? See, there are so many people who have done experiments, gratitude experiments, and they have found this has an incredible impact on people's peace of mind and stress and managing overwhelming feelings, especially through COVID and all of them. What I found is, if I can sleep with a sense of gratitude, that means if I die tonight, if I don't wake up, because every night we are dying, sleep is nothing but a little death anyway. If I can sleep with a certain gratitude, and then when I wake up, can I be surprised and can I be happy and can I celebrate life that day? That means, can I be mindful? Can I practice what I thought about last night? And can I attempt to myself to become a little better, little wiser? I may never be wise, but can I be a little bit wiser than yesterday? Those are two thoughts that come to my mind on a continuous self-reflection basis. And in addition to that, I do meditation. I do silent meditation for a certain amount of time. I do mantra-based meditation. In addition to that, I found the meditation is extremely useful to quiet my mind and do that. But recently, I started doing after bath or something else, sitting in front of I have a small prayer room where I sit in front and either light some lamps. These are some rituals which I didn't bother about for a long period of time. I didn't think rituals are that important. But over a period of time, I realized each ritual allows me to complete something and opens space for something to come up. So I started doing certain prayers also. And I find, like, for example, because we are talking about death and dying, there are large number of people whom I pray for. So just like we have a heartful meditation and some other things like that, there is a particular one called Mrityunjaya mantra. I do that every day. So some of you who may not be familiar with, it goes something like that. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe. Anybody? It looks like Claudia, you also know. You know that? Say.
Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam.
Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam. Deepak, what is the third line? Or Rohit?
Urva Rukmi.
Urva Rukamiva Bandhanan. Rohit, you know the fourth line? Okay, yeah, correct. Okay. So let's say it again. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urva Rukamiva Bandhanan Mrityom. Come on, who can say it? Mrityor Mrichiyamam. What does it mean? That means when my time comes out, just like a ripe fruit can be picked very quickly from so we know, right? When we buy watermelons, when we buy cantaloupes, when we buy many of those fruits, we see whether there is a softness, how easily that came off. Just like that, when our time comes, instead of being bedridden, even going through a lot of loss of quality of life, let me just go without pain for other people, without being bedridden. Let me go. So if it is my time, let me go quickly. If it is not my time, allow me to strengthen and come back. So this is one thing which I try to do 108 times on an almost daily basis, thinking about various people whom I know. I think about all their names and I wish for their goodness, and then I do a prayer. So that is one thing which I do. And I also try to, if I go for walks, long walks, either hiking or walking. When I do that, I used to listen to music, but now I do some of this chanting or meditation, like a walking meditation I try to do, because I find the time is short. So every minute I have, if there is a way in which I can do it for the betterment of my friends and my family and other people, that allows me to feel at peace. So these are some things which I do a lot.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I got reminded of a conversation that we had before this call sometime earlier this week. And I know that many people who have served somebody who was near their, who was on the bed of death, and they were serving them, and then they had to let go of them. Many a times we actually go into this loop of guilt, and we go into this loop wherein we are serving somebody, and when that person goes away, we start blaming ourselves without recognizing that this is the truth of life. And so I know that you yourself went through such an experience when it came to your brother's death. So if you can throw some light on if there is anybody who is going through that, or who has gone through that in the past, wherein they feel guilty about taking care of somebody who is on the deathbed, and they're also, or they had to let go of them, like exactly what you talked about, should we put them on ventilator, should we let them live a quality life and let go of them sooner, versus should we put them on ventilator and increase the span of their life, but the quality of life reduces. So very, very tricky situations. So if you have any advice on that.
I think you were talking about my brother Ravi in 2002. 2000, he got pancreatic cancer. And at that time, because I was doing a lot of research on this mind-body medicine, and, I think arrogance is my middle name. It doesn't come, humility doesn't come easy for me at all. Every time I drop it, another layer of arrogance built in for me. And so I struggle with it a lot. And so my brother was going through a lot, and then I was doing Reiki for him and working with it. And he went through a big procedure, Whipple procedure, they call it, a 12-hour surgery. And he went through an experimental procedure where his pancreas and all of the internal parts were washed literally with a hot chemotherapy agent. And because of that, the organs actually took a long time to come back. He was the longest patient at that year. For 65 days, he was in a hospital or something like that. And after, while he was going through, the doctor and the chemotherapy, the person who does, called oncologist, we had become friends, and we were talking about some other things and all of it. And then he said, I'm looking at systemic chemotherapy. Should I, because we did this experimental procedure where all the organs are really washed, I don't see a need for another round of chemotherapy to let him go through. What do you think of it? He was just casually talking about it. I thought, yeah, if you think that way, I also feel, because you guys have put him through with this so much of long hospital thing, maybe it is not necessary. But you see, I'm not a doctor. I don't have chemotherapy experience, any of them. And I routinely, and I'm sure he asked my brother, and my parents were also there. I do not know how much they followed this conversation or not. But cancer came back, and he died subsequently. And unfortunately, I really felt that I let him down. If I were to say, no, doctor, if I fought with him and say, no, we need to go through, not take risk, we should have gone through, systemic chemotherapy for some more time, maybe he would have lived, maybe he would have been alive. So I carry that guilt for a long period of time. It took me several years for me to get rid of it. And I think this is something that I have seen with very, very many people. Like somebody who is close to me, she was in a bus And then by the time the bus reached, her spouse passed away. And, she could have taken a plane, she thought. And then there is a guilt about it. What I find is, when we feel guilty about them, it is no longer about them. It is about us. So unfortunately, as long as we carry that guilt, we neither do a service to them nor we do a service to us. Like in Hindu rituals, that's why, they say as soon as a person dies, we don't call that person anymore. We call the body. And that is when we call that person has become a preta sarira. And that preta feeling, and when we sit down and do the various karmas, various, third day, fifth day, ninth day, 12th day, when we do, and the sun shaves, and then when go through this, and there is something called a pindikaranam, sapindikaranam. Sapindikaranam is when that happens, then that preta actually becomes pitru. That means that person becomes pitru samana, like he goes into pitrulokas. But for any of that to be done, the idea is during those 12 intense days, 13 intense days, we can go through the grieving process. The idea is, by the time we complete the 13th day and we do what is called a Vaikunta Samaradhana, we are supposed to actually surrender and let go. Actually, there is even a particular ritual called Dharmodakas. Dharmodakas means on 9th day or 10th day, all the relatives have to come and do the bath and then leave water and the tilas, they call. And they leave those saying, I am willing to let you go. Please go. Don't be attached to me. I will take care of myself. I will take care of my children, or I will take care of your children. I will do that. So this is actually a ritual where you can let go of your guilt, your fears, your attachment, so that the jiva can move on its path and you can move on your path. If you carry the guilt, you will never be able to do. So my request and recommendation to you is, if you have done all what you could, and even if you have not, sit down and do some of it and let go through some of this and let go of this guilt, let go of the shame, let go of whatever negative feelings you have, because you are not serving. You are thinking that you are remembering and feeling guilty about them, but you are not actually allowing that person to continue their journey also. So surrender, let go, and pray for the forgiveness if you think it is needed, and then move on with your life so that that life can also be reborn or go to moksha, whatever it can. This is an extremely important way we can let go of our people near and dear who have passed on, but remain more memories, more positive memories. So celebrate their life. That is the best thing I can suggest to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you, Prasad. So we have a little bit of time still, luckily, and we would like to present a few voices from our audience, actually. So at the beginning of the call, more or less, you talk about how divided the world is, and how this left, right, or pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine kind of take over somehow. So Dinesh has a question around that, and he would like to know what would have been the advice of Patanjali, who gave us the Yoga Sutras, to heal the current polarized world.
Okay. Dinesh, the best way in which you can heal is to recognize there is no, what you might call, a bad and good. There is a certain center, but only problem is, it is like a swing. If you sit in the center and not move to one pole or the other pole, there is no life. It's pretty dull and boring. But when we can experience life on both sides, the both poles, when we can actually take the positive and the negative and begin to recognize that they are all actually the two sides of the same coin. Because for a God, or for spirit or for consciousness, whatever you might want to call, there is no good and bad. As a matter of fact, in Hindu tradition, there is a particular story. They talk about Jaya and Vijaya, who were the door gods for Vishnu in the world called Vaikunta, where Vishnu is supposed to live. It seems some saints came to look at Vishnu, and these door gods, just like we talk about Lucifer in the Christian mythology, here these people were arrogant and they did not treat these holy people, the munis, appropriately. And so they cursed them. They cursed them. You are so arrogant that you are guarding the Lord Vishnu. You think that you can control, when he can be seen or when he cannot be seen. So you will fall into a world and then you will actually leave the Vaikunta, which is where you are. Then God comes and says, I will give you a choice. Yes, you will go to the other world, but you can have 3 lives as my enemies, as my devout enemies, like Hiranyakashipu, and there are various demons. You can be born as the worst demons the world is going to be afraid of. And then when you die, you will come back to me. Or if you want to go on the good path, you can have 7 lifetimes as the very polite bhaktas and devotees and wonderful, nice people, but you will take 7 lifetimes to come back to me. Which one would you prefer? What does it really mean? According to God, the pole of negative and positive doesn't mean anything. As long as you have passion, as long as, like that's why they say, at some level you need to become Sita Prajna. But Sita Prajna is a sattvic quality, is not a tamasic quality. It is not just sitting down and say, I don't need anything, I don't want anything, I don't want to do anything. That's not Sita Prajna. Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmanyeva atmana tustaha. You are satisfied within your Atman, not based on external stuff. Sita Pragnasya dochyate. So the Sita Prajna is a person who can experience the opposites, who can embrace those things and be able to be at that peace. When you are at peace with both opposites, that's when, according to Gnana Yoga, that is when you will actually be able to become a person who transcended the duality. That's why, we call sometimes the most dominant philosophy in the Hindu philosophy, even though other ones are equally important, but the dominant one is Shankara's Advaita. It is called not two, but not one. It could have been called monism, but it is not called monism. It is called Advaita, not two. Those two point to 2 extremes. That's what I would say. Thank you for asking that question, Dinesh.
Thank you very much. Another question that we have is from a person by the name Ted. And this is regarding the teachings of Ramana Maharishi. Given the context of death and dying that we have today, is there anything that comes to your mind that you want to share about Ramana Maharishi, or something that you think we could learn from him in this context?
Sure. As a matter of fact, there is a story around Swami Ramana Maharshi regarding his death also. He passed around, I think 1940s or 1940s or 1951, somewhere around that, which was much before my birth. So only things I have are stories I heard. One of the stories is that he got a cancer on the hand, and that cancer had become like a size of a small orange. And the doctor suggested to amputate that hand so that it does not spread and all of it. Ramana Maharshi said, no, I don't want to go through that. It's okay. This is just the body. Body has cancer. I don't have cancer. And I'm perfectly fine. Just dress it up and that will be fine. But it didn't go away. They did surgery a couple of times, but it kept coming back. And it was pretty big. And as a matter of fact, towards the time when he died also, essentially he did not bother. People used to come to him and he used to console them. He used to literally console the people because they were all upset. He said, hey, you know what? This is just my body. I am not that. So, and by the way, that is something that I have seen, like even in when I came to Nipun's house for one of the Awaken circles, here, Ramakrishna Mission head, Swami Prabhuddhananda, I think is his name, he was going through cancer. One Dr. Radha, who comes to the, Dinesh Mehta and Nipun's house at that time when they, she was saying about how he just allowed them to treat. He did not necessarily show that he's going through, it must be excruciatingly painful, but he was able to stay above that. So whether it is Ramana Maharshi or whether it is some of these people who have become the Jivan Muktas or become the Sita Pragnas, who have recognized death does not touch them. Death only touches their body. So from Ramana Maharshi, I would take that lesson saying, ask the question, Koham, who am I? And focus on asking yourself and not getting caught with the bandhanas, the bondage of the body, so that you can be liberated to the soul. And that allows you to let go of the vasanas and samskaras and the attachments and detachments. So that way you can either while you are alive, you can be detached and Sita Pragna, or you can die and then reach moksha and not be reborn. Those are some lessons that I feel one can learn from Ramana Maharshi. He is, one of the most recent in the 20th century philosopher who has brought in some of the living, what you might call a scripture, if you want to call. Because in Hindu, we call it Ananta Vai Vedaha. The Vedas are infinite, but through people like this, we can see them living and they are practicing it, not by just reading books like I do sometimes.
Thank you, Prasad. So we have like one more question of the collective. When we started and we saw that clip, you talk how you realized you didn't know love, and this provoked like a big change. So here in Service Space, of course, the topic of love, compassion, kindness, generosity, and how to design for it is something we value a lot. And we are curious if you could share anything around love and death coming together, and how this awareness of death can, or also impermanence, can invite us to love and maybe open our heart, and how Hinduism treats this topic. So if you could elaborate around this.
You said two things, love and what is the other word you used?
I was talking at the beginning about compassion, kindness, generosity, and then how love and death can
okay,
kind of
good.
And how death can invite us also to love, this impermanence awareness, the awareness that we are passing by this life.
This is not something I have shared publicly with many people. Okay. Okay. I will share it as and when as much as it is appropriate. About few years ago, 3-4 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when my mother fell down and had a hip operation, I was in India. I was staying in, sometimes in the night in her hospital. And then when I came down in the first floor, before I get to the ground floor, as we call in India, you have a ground floor and then there is the first floor. There was a center for ENT, eyes, throat, and neck, nose, I think, ENT. They were there. And I had some ear problem. somehow I felt when I was teaching, sometimes when two people speak from two different directions, I have some confusion and I become irritated, and I wanted to get my ears checked. So they checked my ears and said, 1 year you have a significant loss. It's almost like 60% loss in 1 year. We believe there is some problem. You should get a particular kind of an MRI, angio MRI contrast. And then when I got it done, they said there is a growth in your ear, in some particular nerve. And, we might have to check that out. And this could be, if it becomes what you call like a malignant, it will be a problem, but it's we can do the surgery, we can do the biopsy, we can do some of the kinds of things, and come back after a couple of days, we'll exactly find out, and we'll tell you a little bit more about it, because the radiologist was not available. So for a short period of time, I thought I'm going to die. I got a brain cancer. I thought I'm going to die. And those 2 days, I really had to deeply reflect and recognize that what is important to me, what do I need to do, how do I actually take some of this in place. And I went through a lot of really, knowing that I have short time to live kind of a feeling. But later I found out that unless it does grow and unless it does become malignant, I'm okay. Now it is almost 5 years. I'm still there, and I get that checkup every year or so, MRI, and as long as it is not, it's good. But what that allowed me to do was recognizing I may have only 1 year to live. But how am I living every day? How am I living this year? What am I leaving behind? That the question previously asked, also, life and death, love and death. I realized as long as I have love, death is no longer worrisome for me. And that also reminded me of a time when we went camping once, when my children were young. And when we were camping, at one time I went out and I saw what you call a wild animal. I think it was a bear or something like that in Yellowstone. I think this is the first time when we took our son, or I don't exactly remember the time when we have. I was like really afraid. And then I slowly started moving away from the bear and going away. Till I realized in that particular tent, I have my wife and I think I have my children, and the moment I recognized that the bear is between me and the tent, the fear of death was no longer actually a big issue for me. I suddenly, because I used to take a lot of photographs, and I had I had a what you call tripod and a camera. I didn't care about the camera. I folded the tripod and I used the camera on that side as if I'm having a weapon, and I started moving it around and something else. But luckily, the bear didn't come to me and didn't come to the tent, and then it just went away. What I realized at that time is the fear of death is going to be very, very important to me until love comes into my life. As a matter of fact, when I have love, when I have compassion, and when I have care about somebody, when I focus on it, love has no place in that heart. So that was not just once. I have seen many, many, many times in my own life that when I'm filled with love, when somebody is filled with love, there is no enmity, there is no anger, all of them disappear. But if I only have an idea of a love, if I have only memory of a love, if I have only cognitive feeling, something I remember about love, which is not love actually, it is only a symbol of love, then I'm not present. I'm not present to love. I'm only present to the images and the past and memories of love. That can probably not take away the fear. So let us be present to what's happening. So falling in love, I need to continually falling in love. I cannot just say to my wife, I love you, or I cannot just say at the end of the phone call, I love you to my children. And that is not love at all. That's actually an autopilot statement. It doesn't mean anything. It's a cliche at that level. So maybe if we can think, when I say I love you, maybe we need to take one extra moment and say, can I feel that in my heart as I say it? When I care about somebody, can I pay attention to them a little bit more? Can I be present to them? Can I be mindful of that? If I can be that, then fear of death, fear actually don't bother us very much. But I think that is a, it's not common sense these days anymore. Somehow we mistake our autopilot behavior to be our authentic expression of love or kindness. I think we need to reconnect to our deeper self, where we continually fall in love. We continually feel that care, continually express that presence. We need to bring it in our presence, and we need to recognize it in other people's presence. If we can learn that sensitivity and awareness, I think the world will be a better place. We will actually operate with a very, very different kind of a relationship with each other.
Thank you so much, Prasad. That was really beautiful. Also like a beautiful advice for us all to be present and operate really from that space in the heart, and not from just kind of thinking of a concept, but really kind of embody the concept, and once and again kind of fall in love with life and with everyone, actually. Like during this call, I'm sure all of us fell in love with you, actually.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. Actually, not just fall in love with a person, falling in love with life. That's beautiful, Claudia. I learned that from you. Thank you. That's a better way of thinking. Can I fall in love with life and be alive, rather than fall in love with my thoughts and my ideas and my story and lose touch with life? That is probably a worse form of death than being dead in the body, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prasad. It was wonderful learning from you, listening to your wisdom, especially how to deal with someone, when you have to serve somebody who is on his or her deathbed, and how do you serve them, and at the same time, how as a corporate leader or as a business leader, one can actually apply some of these concepts in their day-to-day life as a corporate leader or a businessman. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing, and we really appreciate the time that you spent with us today, and it's an honor and pleasure to learn from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There is a small chant, if I might say that, because that is connected with death also. Just Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That means from the world of untruth, where facts are being questioned, your fact versus my fact, from there, can we come to a shared fact, shared truth? tamasoma jyotirgamaya, from the darkness of our own reality, from our own individuality, can we bring some light so that it shines brightly for us and for other people? Mrutyorma amrutam gamaya, from the death, let us tap into the immortality and discover that everything on this planet, the climate, each other, animals, everything, trees, we are all part of the same consciousness. We are part of that Amrita. If we can look at everything as life, then we become alive. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let there be peace everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Prasad and Deepak and all our audience today. It has been a real pleasure. So we would like to invite you again to a minute of silence to close our time together.